So interrogation, as we all know, is questioning somebody to try and find out did they commit a crime. Enhanced interrogation is when you add on all these mind control methods, drugs, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, sensory isolation, good cop, bad cop techniques, whatever you can dream up to try and get something out of somebody.
Henry Murray was not an evil scientist. There's some plausible arguments to be made that he had some connections with the CIA. He was very proud of his service to the country and took working with the CIA, if he did, as part of that responsibility. He was a responsible citizen, and the country needed good assessment of personnel. So he could provide that better than anyone else could.
I was a career operations officer in the CIA who became involved for a time in the interrogation of one of the top members, we believed, of Al-Qaeda, and thereby was involved for that time in the enhanced interrogation program, which is torture and is mind-altering procedures. My experiences, tragically, are directly relevant to the experience Kaczynski went through because the methods used by the CIA were directly derived from, not just inspired by, what Murray was trying to do in the 50s and early 60s. And that is that you can break somebody down and you can alter their minds. The theory was you will be psychologically broken down and dislocated so that you can then be reformed as a cooperative source.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, you get a chance for some defense here.
Well,
I mean, well, you say
you're defending yourself.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, you
if able.
The idea that Harry Murray was the villain, a malignant character, and that Theodore Kaczynski was the victim, all of that is nonsense. It's simply without foundation.
Pouring with the
Don't interrupt me, please. On this avoiding of society, or of this society is a bad thing, is that why you're trying to grow that beard?
No.
I mean, are you conforming with the nonconformists?
No, I'm not conforming with the nonconformists.
Well,
if I were conforming with the nonconformists, if I were conforming with the nonconformists, I mean, really, this isn't really a beard yet.
You're darn right it's not.
Ted was a child when he was exposed to these experiments. He was 16, 17, so it is absolutely possible that this study had a profound impact on Ted's neurobiological development.
Thousands of students all over the United States performed very ably in these kinds of experiments without a problem. I do not believe that the testing at the Harvard Psychological Clinic did anything at all to transform Theodore Kaczynski.
You haven't really criticized my views except in...
What's important to understand is that Ted Kaczynski was uniquely traumatized because of his hospital visit before psychological warfare was performed on his psyche at a university without his knowledge.
I actually asked Mom, what's wrong with Teddy? And Mom's saying, what do you mean? There's nothing wrong with Teddy. What are you talking about? And I said, well, he doesn't have any friends. I mean, why? It was at that point that Mom decided she needed to share something with me so that I could hopefully understand my brother better. And this was a memory that had haunted her really all her life. As Mom described it, he originally, he was like a laughing, active baby. He had gotten sick. Like good parents, they took him to the hospital. He ended up being in the hospital for over a week as they tried to diagnose what the problem was. There were rashes on his body. Mom always faulted the hospital. They would have been there every day visiting him, but the hospital said no. It's kind of like we don't want parents to be in the way. We got our work to do. We have our little baby to cure, so keep your distance. They were only allowed to visit him 2 times a week for 2 hours. After that, he was like completely shut down. Like there was no smiling, the eye contact was no longer there. She and our father tried it took him a couple of weeks after Ted came home from the hospital to get him to the point where he would seem to trust a little bit and make some eye contact.
There is this theory that an infant that doesn't bond with the mother develops psychopathy as a defensive mechanism, that they feel no pain, they feel no trauma, but of course at the same time they lose the sense of empathy, a moral compass.
One of the symptoms of chauvinism and ignorance is the artificial separation of the emotional maturation process and the physical maturation process. When we look at Soviet-era orphanages where the same approach was taken, we find case after case of grown children who are profoundly dissociative, distrusting, autistic, and dysfunctional because they were left in isolation without a safe and secure emotional connection and without adequate touch. Hospitals, by their very nature, are traumatic for children. And it is our cultural ignorance that leads us to put infants in a hospital for their own good. And it's a profound state of cultural ignorance that actively separates the parent from the child despite the child screaming and the parent's healthy instinct to hold their child. And so here we see the first inducement into complex PTSD as an infant. Having done that, the institution of government and CIA working undercover in a public university proceeds to attack an already traumatized university student at a public university without his knowledge or consent to have psychological warfare directed at him. Now, they did not bother because the ends justified the means in another face of chauvinism, where it's all about the results and not how you get there. They didn't bother to do their research to understand that this was already a deeply traumatized child that had been betrayed by an institution of technology. And what's important to understand in psychological science is that when overwhelming figures of authority, be they a hospital, a doctor, one's parents, a university, or one's government, collude to traumatize a vulnerable citizen, it induces helplessness, terror, pain, loneliness, resentment, and hate. If you induce these states in an individual and do not repair the damage due to ignorance or the sociopathic nature of the institution, you have communicated to a human being that they are surrounded by reptiles, because it is people who are profoundly ignorant or profoundly reptilian that will systematically torment an individual in their care. That is the behavior of a reptile. It is the behavior of a sociopath. all human states are contagious, including sociopathic states. And the reason for this is that when the authority figures surrounding an individual behave sociopathically, it punishes the empathic centers of the brain for being online, because you are a human surrounded by reptiles. This increases the pain to a point where the empathic brain shuts down and one's reptilian brain takes over to survive a reptilian environment, an environment curated by sociopaths. Now, if we understand that you can give someone the flu by coughing in their face, you can give someone AIDS by raping them, you can give someone helplessness by butchering their wife in front of them, and you can give someone a profound distrust by behaving profoundly untrustworthy. We can see that the odds, scientifically speaking, of sociopathic behavior go up when a child is routinely exposed to sociopathic behavior. Ted Kaczynski was routinely exposed to sociopathic behavior, first as an infant, developing complex PTSD from which he did not recover, then by his professors at a public university lying and operating under false pretenses to break him down. Now, since an individual cannot withstand these attacks by authority figures without support and without them being acknowledged as cruel and specific to individuals, Ted's reptilian brain took over to protect him from a reptilian environment. And it's not a matter of who's to blame or who's right and wrong. It is a matter of science to say that the more you expose an individual to untrustworthy, incompetent, ignorant, and sociopathic behavior, the more likely they are, statistically speaking, to behave sociopathically from their own reptilian brain.